Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns made two trades Thursday before they made a pick, passed on Travis Hunter, took Michigan defensive tackle Mason Graham, and didn't trade back into the first round for a quarterback. They are already on the clock in the second round with pick number 33. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. That's quite a night, huh, Chud?
What a night, Scott. That was wild and not shocking, really, if you think about it. I mean, the Browns love to trade. You've mentioned it many times right here in the podcast that it's in their nature. I mean, how many times have you said this is what they do? This is the regime's nature. I didn't know. Listen, none of us knew for sure what they would do. We felt pretty confident that if they made the pick, it was going to be Hunter. I still think it would have been had they made the pick. But, not shocking at all if they trade, especially you start hearing the rumblings. But I have to tell you, Scott, I don't hate it. I understand it. I understand also how fans are upset. You want that, let's say, sexy pick, the guy that, can possibly play both ways, the unicorn, the guy that was built up by Andrew Berry. I get it. You want players. I've talked to some people at work this morning. I see it on social media. When are we going to draft players that can help us win on the field? I get it. But I see this as a recovery mission from the Deshaun Watson trade. This is Deshaun Watson trade, put this franchise behind, and this is them trying to catch up. And I don't see it as getting bad picks, right? I mean, it's not like they traded with the Eagles where they're going to get pick 28 or 29. Hey, listen, if Jacksonville's good and somehow they go to the playoffs, all right, tough break. Yeah. But you're talking about you're getting two solid picks in this draft with going to 5 and then going into the second round, and you're getting their first round pick next year. I think it was a good deal. I really do. Understand why people are upset? Yes, it's possible they just let a unicorn go. I get it, but I totally understand it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sean. I think you're spot on. The thing about Hunter, I think it would have been, I think he would have added a certain high level of excitement because he's a playmaker, because he scores touchdowns, because he's trying to do something that hasn't been done in decades in the NFL by playing significant snaps on both sides of the ball. And I think it would have been really fun to watch that if you're a Browns fan, and I think it would have been really fun to cover for me, right? It just the stories you would have is, okay, how's he practicing? Where are we seeing him practice? What the meeting schedule's like all those things would have been cool. And I think there were some really fun dynamics involved with Travis Hunter. But if you can, and I'm not saying you can take that out of it, but if you can take a step back, Mason Graham is a top 4 or 5 player in this draft. I'm looking at Dane Brugler from The Athletic. He does this great, draft. His draft guide is called The Beast. He's got Mason Graham number 4. I don't know if you can find a draft analyst who didn't have Mason Graham in the top 5. So you're getting a top 5 pick at a key position. Now, it's not quarterback. We could argue if it's as necessary as defensive end, what's more important, because it's all about getting to the quarterback, and that's how they're going to use Mason Graham, is to be disruptive in the interior of the defensive line. Defensive tackles getting paid a ton of money, like Andrew Berry has said. He said it again Thursday night. He's said it time and again that it's really hard to find pass rushing defensive tackles. When you find one, you can't give them up, and they're going to cost you a ton of money. So they think they found this guy, and it's tough to do, and it's a key position. And they also got, like you mentioned, the 36th pick, which is really valuable. They're in position to get a really good player early in the second round tonight, and they get a first rounder next year, which we'll talk about this, Chud, but could be used to help them land a quarterback in 2026, depending on what they do the rest of this draft. And if you just said, take Travis Hunter out of this, that you move down 3 spots in a draft, you get a top 5 player, you get the number 36 pick and a first rounder next year, and the player you're giving up is not a quarterback. And I think that's crucial to mention. It's a 188-pound receiver / cornerback. It's not a quarterback. I think from that aspect, it's a big win. And if you reverse it and say, again, make it anonymous. If the Browns had done the opposite and traded number 36, a future first rounder, to go up 3 spots to take a quote unquote undersized receiver, you would kill them for that, right? Or you'd rip them for that. So I understand why Andrew Berry did it. And the point you started with is correct. We know this organization prefers to add picks. They believe that in general, draft picks are a crapshoot, and the more bites at the apple, the better. All those things. I think it was a really high value trade. Now, if Travis Hunter goes on to be a Hall of Famer and Mason Graham isn't, then you and who knows what next year's first round pick becomes. It could be viewed as a failure. And I get the fans' frustration because they want playmakers, they want excitement, but I got a hard time killing this trade.
Yeah. Well, and we can't assume that this unicorn is going to happen. I mean, we don't know for sure that he's going to be able to play both ways. We have no idea. It's the human body. I mean, it just doesn't. It's not something. No one does it, right? So you don't know it's going to work out that way. Now he could still be a Hall of Famer on one side of the ball, and there's no doubt about it that you could regret that. But I have another thought to this, Scott, is that, oh, and by the way, one quick point.
Yeah.
It's usually how they operate, except when you trade for Deshaun Watson.
No, you're right about that. You're right. And real quick, before you get that extra point, Judd, Travis Hunter is the lightest player ever to be drafted in the top 2. He's the only one under 200 pounds. So,
wow.
That doesn't mean he's not going to succeed. But as a guy trying to play both ways, that would be a concern.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe he'll do it. We'll see. But so here's one thing I was thinking about last night. I turned to my wife. So I stayed up a little later. The last 2 nights have been brutal for me. Cavs, playoffs, and the draft, right? I mean, when you get up
it's a good thing you're a good napper.
Yeah, I have no choice but to nap, yeah. But when you get up at 2:30, these nights are rough. But I turned to my wife. It's funny. She was more in, and believe me, she likes the football side of it. But how about the outfits, man? She was so into the fashion. Like Carter, what was he wearing? And it's just funny to see from I don't watch the draft with that on my radar.
Right.
But she did, and then it opened up my eyes to now I'm thinking, Hunters and that. I know LeBron James when he got drafted his suit. I mean, I know historically the guys want to look good and everything, but the fashion and how it changes. And we did a story this morning. One of the players had Crocs on with diamonds or studs or whatever. It's just interesting to see that perspective. And she was, very interested in the fashion. But as we were watching it, I sat there and I thought, I'm like, there are 4 teams that have never been to the Super Bowl, and 2 of them just made a trade out of desperation, kind of, right? Oh. I mean, that's what the Browns continue to do. They're trying to figure out how to get to the Super Bowl, and they haven't figured it out. They haven't figured out how to get to the quarterback. And I started thinking, I'm like, how many teams in the NFL would have made that deal besides Jacksonville? And I'm going to bet not many. And right there, that tells me that most NFL teams would have done what the Browns did.
Oh, I completely agree with that. And, the Jaguars have a first-year GM and I believe an impatient owner. And that can be a rough combination. So I do think the Browns are able to capitalize on that. I agree with you that maybe no other team, but certainly few other teams would have made a similar trade. And, when we talk about all the draft scenarios leading up to last night, the main reason I didn't think the Browns would trade down from number 2 is because I didn't think anybody wanted to move up. And maybe not nobody wanted to move up, but nobody's willing to give up what the Browns wanted in order to move down. And the Jaguars did that. Like, I don't think the Patriots, let's say the Patriots really like Travis Hunter. From 4 to 2, like, they weren't giving up a second-round pick. I don't think they were giving up next year's first-rounder. So the Browns found the team that was willing to do that and felt compelled to do it. And it also speaks to the different situations of the organizations. Jacksonville believes they have has its quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. They thought they were ready to compete last year. I think it was last year where the owner said they had the best roster in the history of the franchise, and then I think they go 3-14 or 4-13, whatever they went last year. So there's a lot of pressure to win right now. And then you look and you have a new GM and a new coach and all those things. Then you flip it to the Browns, and you mentioned it at the top, Chud, and you're 100% right. This is so much about recovering from Deshaun Watson. And you gave away 3 first-round picks, so now you recovered one of those. I know it's years later, and, maybe they're not directly tied, but they're certainly connected at some level. They still don't have the franchise quarterback, and now they're trying to find him. And they're limited in salary cap space. And they have to get a young infusion of talent because they didn't have those 3 first-rounders. And they traded a couple of second-rounders in that 3-year window. So it speaks to that. And you're in a quarterback draft class that isn't believed to be strong. Cam Ward goes number 1, so you didn't have a chance at the best one. Jimmy Haslam has talked about they're not going to force it at quarterback. So it feels like the Browns are taking a longer-term view of their organization and how they're going to build it than the Jaguars are. And I think all that came together in this trade.
Yeah. Well, trust me, from fantasy football, I watched a lot of Jags, and it was painful. Their offense, because they feel like they have so much potential,
yeah.
and it just doesn't happen for them. But we're not talking about the Jags here as much as certainly we want to keep talking about the Browns. And I tell you, Scott, if that first-round pick next year wouldn't have been in it, I would be going off right now. I would be upset because I feel that's the moneymaker. That's what makes this deal sweet, is getting that. Listen, the second-round pick they got this year, I love that too. But if they would have bunched in 2/3 or spread out throughout the draft and I would have been annoyed. That would have been tough to sell. But the number 1 pick next year, that's what makes it work.
There's no doubt. And Andrew Berry, who was pretty tight-lipped, called it a non-starter, that they wouldn't have made the trade without that first-round pick, Chud. So he felt the same way. And it's all about, it sounds silly sometimes to say it's all about value. But it is all about value. And when some fans focus on Travis Hunter, and just Travis Hunter, Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta and the rest of the people in that organization take a step back and say, okay, it's Travis Hunter, but on this other side of the ledger, it's Mason Graham, it's number 36, it's next year's first rounder. And if you make that comparison, I think it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah. So I talked to someone this morning who was annoyed. It's we're always about picks and picks. We just need to get the player. Well, my answer to that is I don't disagree, but we still got a pretty darn good player. Like you had mentioned, a top 5 on most analysts' board. I mean, if you watch the guy play and you look at what he did, and now you match him up with Myles Garrett, that's pretty awesome on the defensive line. So my answer to there is you still got a top 5 player. It's just not as sexy as Hunter. I get that. But the other thing I will say, Scott, this is my concern. Andrew Berry has not hit a lot of home runs on picks, and that's where this deal could go sour. Now you got to hit on these picks. You got to hit tonight, and you got to hit next year.
Oh, there's no doubt. And that's where a lot of the fans' frustration, angst, worry comes from, Chud, is they don't have any faith in Andrew Berry making these picks. And I get that. And I've had multiple people ask me in the run-up to the draft, why should they have faith in Andrew Berry? And I don't have an answer for that. I mean, if you're looking for reasons and looking for optimism, he's really smart. I think people are off base when they question that, as a GM, because he is really smart. You can be really smart and screw up drafts. It happens all the time. He's a really smart guy. I think they do a ton of research. I think it's a well-run front office. I don't think there's infighting. I think they have it established well. They have analytics. They have scouts. I think they're positioned to do well. Now, if you just go on his history of draft picks, then no, you can't have that faith. And that's why I completely understand why the fans have that anger and frustration and all of it, And I don't have an answer for him. I can't say that, yeah, Andrew Berry's going to get it right or he's gotten it right in the past because too many times he hasn't. Now, I think Mason Graham's a good pick. So I think he's headed in the right direction, right? So we'll see what he does at 33 and 36 and next year's first round pick, assuming he gets a chance to make that one. But when we talk about the misses Andrew Berry's had, plenty of those have been at D tackle, Chud. And they took Tommy Togiai at Ohio State. And I think he was a fourth round pick. He didn't last 2 years, I want to say. Siaki Ika was a third round pick 2 years ago. We remember Jim Schwartz, the coordinator, calling him a Ferrari, that instead of they were going to turn him from a dump truck to a Ferrari. And he was overweight and didn't fit their attacking scheme at all. It was a complete miss from a scouting perspective. He didn't make it into his second season with the Browns. And then in the middle was Perion Winfrey, who, for off-the-field reasons, didn't last into his second year. So he's been a disaster. He and the Browns have been a disaster at defensive tackle. The jury's still out on Mike Hall Jr., who they took in the second round from Ohio State a year ago. And he was suspended, and then he was injured. There's obviously talent there, but we don't know if that talent is ever going to be, come to fruition or realized. We need to see him on the field way more. And there is a scenario out there where he pairs with Mason Graham, and you go, oh my gosh, that's the interior line, and the Browns got him in the second round, in the first round, in back-to-back drafts. But Andrew Berry's yet to hit on the D tackle. So he's going to have to get this one right when he hasn't gotten anyone right before.
Scott, he had mentioned that they feel the sweet spot of this draft is where they're going to be picking in the second round, right? And then they also feel like the top 30 picks next year are going to be better than the top 30 this year. Is that right?
Yep. I think both of those things are part of it, Chud. And I keep saying we're going to get in the quarterback, and we will. And Andrew Berry acknowledged this, that having the extra first-round pick in 2026 could be valuable if they're still looking for that long-term answer at quarterback. And for him to admit that, I think is important. He's talked about how that's the only position, quarterback, that they scout in a 2-year window, meaning they look at this year's draft class and next year's potential draft class, and that factors into decisions they make in the draft. And that was a factor in this trade. So I think that's worth noting. Now, he did say that regardless of that, they would have made this trade, even if it had nothing to do with the quarterback need. They still would have made this trade unless they were going to take a quarterback at number 2. That's the only time they would have stayed at number 2 rather than take this haul that they got from the Jaguars.
One thing I want to talk about real quick is, we talked about this on the last pod about how it's amazing how things change between the end of the season and the draft, and there's no games played.
Yeah, right.
But don't you feel like Travis Hunter, like if the draft was 2 months ago, would fans be as upset as they are right now? Because I don't feel like the hype was there with Hunter. It was more Shedeur Sanders back then, 2 months ago. Oh, they got to take a quarterback. I mean, everyone was saying they have to take a quarterback at 2. Well, as it turns out, that wasn't their plan at all. And then the hype train started. So I guess my point is, if this draft happened 2 months ago, would fans have liked this deal more that happened last night?
That's a great question, Chud. I think you're right. And there's a million reasons for why the narratives change over 2 months. Part of it is media catching up to the scouts, the NFL media catching up to the scouts. Part of it is the entrance of the coaches, the NFL coaches, into the draft process. The NFL coaches don't have time to watch a bunch of college football, let alone break down film. So when the season ends, all of a sudden they jump into the film. And Kevin Stefanski and Tommy Rees and Bill Musgrave, the quarterback's coach, now they are adding their opinions on all the quarterbacks and all the player, all the assistant coaches on players across the roster, but specifically quarterback. They're adding their input to what the scouts did, and that can change a draft board. It can change how teams view players. But you're right, Judd. The momentum for Travis Hunter certainly built Maybe it starts, at the end of his season with the Heisman Trophy, but even after that, as the draft process went along, it certainly built in Cleveland the excitement level because people thought they were going to take him. He was a huge betting favorite to go at number 2, which he did, but for the Browns to take it number 2.
God, that's you always are right on for the most part. All right, you're 98% every once in a while. But that's a really good point with the coaches. I guess I never really thought about that. Did you, is that something you've talked with people about, or where is that? I don't really see that theory come up a lot.
Yeah, I've talked to people, leading up to this draft about it. And if you run into guys at the combine, we've talked about how you bump into old former Browns coaches or coaches in general. And I don't know how many times I've heard I haven't been able to look at that guy yet. So Andrew Berry and just from a Browns perspective, Andrew Berry and his staff have spent months and months and even probably more than a year scouting these players. And then all of a sudden there's a fresh input from the coaches. And I think the later you get in the draft, probably the less important the coach's input is because can you watch a ton of film about every player? Maybe not. But when you're talking top 5, when you're talking the top quarterbacks, then I think that the coach impact is certainly felt. I don't have any question about that at all.
Yeah. All right, let's focus now on the quarterback. And, everyone wants to know, Scott, are they going to take a quarterback tonight? Shedeur Sanders does not go in the first round. Did you see his little speech last night? It is, and he did not go to the draft last night. That was a telling sign. I don't know why. I guess I didn't research it, but he wasn't there. Did you see he spoke, though, to the people that he was with?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was a pretty mature response.
It was. And, he's become such a polarizing figure, Chud, and I think unfairly so. And there's a lot of anonymous names that have ripped this kid throughout the draft process. And I know that Dion, being his dad, influences how I think people inside the NFL and fans view Shedeur Sanders. Everybody I've talked to said the guy's a good kid. That includes Pat Shurmur, his coordinator at Colorado. So I don't have any issues about him as a person. We've talked about it. I like him more as a player than a lot of people do. I would have been okay with the Browns taking him at 2. I think he can be a successful quarterback in this league. So if I feel that way, I certainly feel at number 33, it's incredible value, especially when the Browns have this dire need at quarterback. Having said that, and I could be wrong, I don't expect the Browns to take Shedeur Sanders today. I just don't. I think if they really loved him, they could have moved back into the first round to get him like the Giants did with Jackson Dart. I think somebody else takes Shedeur Sanders. I think there's a chance the Browns trade out of 33. I think there's a good chance the Browns trade out of 33 because that's a coveted spot. Teams have had hours and hours to say, hey, this is a guy that's still on the board that I want to go get. And it plays into the Browns' belief that more picks, the better. Can they turn 33 into a couple extra picks today? Yes. Could they turn one into a second-round pick next year, which I think has great value? I think that's realistic. So I think the Browns trade down. I don't know if the team that trades up with them takes Shedeur Sanders and take another player because there's a lot of attractive players still left. I just kind of feel like the Sanders ship has sailed for the Browns again. I might be wrong. If I were their Browns, I would take him at 33. But also having the 36th pick, I think it makes it a lot easier to trade 33. And 33 has been traded in each of the last 3 drafts.
Oh, wow. Good nugget there. Well, maybe a dumb question. Do you think there would be a team that would be so desperate that they would trade a first-round pick in a certain year to get it?
I don't.
Yeah. That's probably, has that ever happened? I mean, just off the top of my head, I would probably think not.
Yeah, I not that jumps to mind. Maybe a team would a team like the Chiefs or the Eagles that expect to go to the Super Bowl, would it be conceivable that they could trade a first-round pick, which is really a second-round pick because it's at the bottom of the first round, or you think it's going to be, mean, maybe,
Yeah.
like I guess I could talk myself into that scenario. I mean, usually how it works, Chud, and when I talk about, could they get a second round pick next year? Picks this year. So if you trade, like, it's almost like a third round pick in 2025 is worth a second round pick in 2026 because you're delaying getting that player for a year. And you're giving up a lot there. You know what I mean? So you can have this player right now. So the cost of having to wait to get that player is usually a bump in a round. So that's why I think if you're giving up the 33rd pick this year, it's not too much to ask for a second rounder next year. And maybe somebody, a team throws in a third or a fourth or what. I think they would definitely have to throw in more than just a second round pick next year. It would have to be, let's say you go from 33 to 44. So you get a second round pick next year to move down 12 spots or 11 spots. That feels like something the Browns would do.
You think that they pass on taking a quarterback tonight in the second round because they would like their options more next year in the first round?
I think there's a direct correlation, Chud, to the longer they wait today. And I wrote a little bit about this on something I just posted on Brown Zone. I wrote late last night and posted this morning. The longer they wait today to get a quarterback, and I'm convinced they get a quarterback at some point in the next 2 days, right? They just can't not take a quarterback. The longer they wait, the more it screams quarterback in 2026. So if it's Shadur Sanders or Jalen Milroe or Tyler Shuck at 33, then there's a good chance that they believe one of those guys can work out and be the long-term answer. If it's Riley Leonard or Dylan Gabriel in rounds 4 or 5, then it's okay, maybe this kid turns into something, but we know we have chances to go get a quarterback in 2026. And there's a middle ground there, maybe a Will Howard in round 3 or a Kyle McCord in round 3. And then the kid plays as a rookie and maybe he convinces you. But I think it's fair to say that the longer they wait, the more it's, hey, this becomes about 2026. It becomes about, hey, can Kenny Pickett show us anything where we don't need to draft a guy in 2026? It just changes the dynamic so much. I feel the longer you wait, especially in a quarterback draft class that is considered weak.
The one thing I don't want to have happen, though, is take a guy in another round, not the second round, and then next year we have to keep saying, well, we need to see what we have in this guy. We need to see what we have in this guy before we can, make a decision. And then you're sitting there wondering, well, can this be the guy, or now we have to draft the guy in the first round next year? Like, I just don't want to run into that.
No, I hear you, and that's certainly a concern. And again, it depends who that player is. It depends what you see out of that guy, even in the preseason or training camp or whatever. I think those questions are quieted. They're not completely silenced, but they're certainly quieted if it's a guy at 33 or 36, or even if it's one of those top guys, like a Shuck, a Sanders, or a Murrow, guys that I feel like have the potential to be good starters in this league.
All right, so your prediction is that they trade out of the 33, but then they have that pick that they just got from the Jags. Who are some guys you could see them? I guess it's tough. We don't have the crystal ball, so it's like, are they going to take a quarterback? But who are some guys you could see them drafting in one of those two spots? If they might have two, they might only have one.
Sure. Let's talk positions. It's playmakers. And this doesn't mean they couldn't take a defensive guy. And could they get it? They desperately need a safety. There's a good one there from South Carolina. Could they do that? Yes. But I feel like the attention has to be spent on playmakers. And they need a receiver, especially because they don't have Travis Hunter. So you need a receiver. Luther Burden III from Missouri is an attractive option. There's 2 receivers from Iowa State that the Browns could take at the top of the second round. There were only 3 receivers went. It's Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins. Only 3 receivers went in the first round. So there's good receivers to be had at the top of the second round. At tight end, LSU's Mason Taylor, Miami's Elijah Arroyo. I really like both those guys. And then you have running back. I don't love running back high in the second round. There's a bunch of good guys. And only 2 went in the first round. I would prefer just in general with running backs to wait, and I think third round would be the sweet spot. But Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson are all running backs that the Browns could take in the second round and come in and be starters and have an instant impact. And while I think about running backs, Chud, I just want to say once the Browns traded to 5, there were certainly people, fans, that thought Ashton Jeanty, the Boise State running back who was crazy productive, should have been the pick there. I just think that's too high for a running back, period.
Yeah, good nugget there, because I was wondering if they might do that when it happened. But, it seems like they really are big on Graham, no question about it. I mean, obviously because they took him, but just listening to Barry talk about him, they're big on this guy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And that's it's going to be, in who knows if it's fair or unfair. There's going to be a comparison between Mason Graham and Travis Hunter, probably for Graham's whole career, because it's going to be, oh, they could have had Hunter, they could have had Hunter. Now, if Graham outperforms Hunter, then it's an even bigger win for the Browns, right? Given all the picks that they got, the extra picks they got that we talked about. And I thought it was interesting that Graham got asked about that last night and said, yeah, that adds motivation for him, that people are going to be looking at him like that way. And he's a confident kid. Talked about fitting in right away with the dog pound. Talked about coming in and helping this team get back to its winning ways. He mentioned winning a Super Bowl right away on TV, moments after he had been drafted. So I think he's got the right mindset to have that increased pressure. And I do think there's increased pressure given that trade.
All right. Well, Scott, I'll tell you, since I've come back, you're working me, man. This is 3 pods in the last like 10 days or whatever. I'm getting a little winded, so I'm about out of time here before and let's not forget I did live TV for 2 hours this morning.
Yeah.
So I'm running. I'm no two-way player like Travis Hunter. I got to go get a nap. So anything you want to say before I say goodbye?
No, just it's going to be another intriguing day, Chud. I mean, right now they're scheduled to make 4 picks today. They have 7 left in the draft. They're down to 1 6th-round pick after starting with 4. I mean, at 4:30 yesterday or 5 o'clock yesterday, they made a trade with Houston swapping third-day picks, which is weird. You just don't see that early. I mean, it's days ahead of those picks, but Houston wanted to get something done. The Browns made a trade there. So I think we're going to have a lot of activity. There's a lot of time and a lot of opportunities for the Browns to improve this roster. And we have to focus on quarterback because that's what we do. Chud, I appreciate the extra work. We're going to have to do this again next week, buddy. We're going to have a lot more to break down. We'll have to do this early next week, whether you like it or not. You might not be a two-way player, but you're a top 5 draft pick in my book, buddy.
Well, thanks. I feel the same about you. So we're able to give the listener.
All right, I appreciate it, Chud. You go take a nap. Thanks again. Thanks everybody for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.